Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into what I can only describe as a true medical mystery. We're unpacking an invisible, absolutely excruciating condition that leaves so many patients completely misunderstood and honestly in sheer agony. It's one of those diseases that just hides in plain sight, baffling families, and sometimes even medical professionals.
Okay, just imagine this scenario for a second. You wake up one morning, and the pain in your shoulders and your hips is so severe that you physically cannot raise your arms. You can't even roll over in bed. So naturally, panic sets in, right? You rush to the hospital. But here's where we hit a massive disconnect. The patient's reality is just sheer agony. Yet the objective data? It's staring back blankly. The doctors take x-rays, they run all the standard blood tests, and the results show absolutely nothing wrong. Everything looks totally normal, or maybe just slightly elevated. It makes no sense.
And because this disease is virtually invisible on those standard tests, a pretty heartbreaking narrative starts to unfold. These patients are devastatingly misjudged. They end up hearing things from family, coworkers, or even their own doctors, like, "Oh, you're just lazy," or "It's just normal muscle pain," or the classic, "Well, it's just your age." Let me tell you, the mental anguish of simply not being believed, that can sometimes be worse than the physical pain itself.
So let's get into part one, the invisible pain mystery. We really need to uncover the truth behind this hidden agony and actually validate what these patients are experiencing. Because believe me, there is a very real, very physical battle going on inside their bodies.
This condition actually has a name. It's called Polymyalgia rheumatica, or PMR for short. Basically, it's a severe inflammatory disease that mostly strikes people over the age of 50. And it's sneaky. It often develops really rapidly, like sometimes over just a few days or weeks, causing this intense bilateral pain right in the shoulders and the pelvic region. Oh, and another massive red flag, morning stiffness that lasts for over 45 minutes. We're not talking about a simple ache from sleeping funny here. This is a full-blown systemic disease.
Moving on to part two, the true cause of PMR. If it isn't your standard muscle pain, even though ironically the word myalgia is literally right there in the name, what on earth is actually going on under the skin to trigger all this intense suffering?
Well, thanks to some huge advancements in modern ultrasound and MRI technologies, medical science finally spotted what those x-rays were completely missing. The inflammation actually isn't in the muscle fibers themselves. Instead, it's hiding out in these microscopic cushions known as bursae and in the tunnels surrounding your joints called tendon sheaths. Plus, researchers found this widespread inflammation in the tiny, microscopic blood vessels winding through the muscles. So it's this deep, hidden systemic inflammation that's causing all the chaos.
Which brings us to part three, the hidden danger, GCA. Because, as if the joint cane wasn't enough, PMR can actually escalate into a severe, life-altering medical emergency.
Recent research has highlighted a pretty alarming reality. Around 20% of PMR patients go on to develop a linked condition known as Giant Cell Arteritis, or GCA. In fact, in modern medicine, doctors don't even really view these as entirely separate diseases anymore. They're increasingly seen as a connected spectrum of disease. Basically, if you have PMR, you are absolutely on the radar for GCA.
So the absolutely crucial point here is knowing the warning signs of GCA. If you have PMR and you suddenly experience a throbbing pain on the side of your head, or maybe your jaw gets incredibly fatigued and painful just from chewing your food, a symptom they call jaw claudication, or if you notice any sudden blurry changes in your vision, you have got to act immediately.
And why is that? Because this is a super critical medical emergency. GCA actually attacks the large blood vessels. If that intense inflammation travels up and reaches the blood vessels supplying your eyes, it can cause complete, sudden, and totally irreversible blindness. I cannot stress this enough. If those warning signs appear, you cannot wait around. You need immediate specialist intervention. No exceptions.
That leads us right into part four, the steroid dilemma. Because to cure this agonizing pain and, prevent things like blindness, doctors historically relied on one primary weapon. But it came with a massive catch. I kind of call this the steroid trap. Historically, doctors would prescribe an initial dose of a steroid, like prednisolone, usually around 15 to 25 milligrams. And honestly, at first it feels like magic. A patient who couldn't even roll over yesterday can suddenly get up, walk, and move again. It's incredible. It actually led doctors to believe this was just an easily curable benign disease. But large-scale tracking over the last decade revealed a much darker reality. When patients try to taper off those steroids after a year or so, the unbearable pain dramatically returns.
They get trapped, essentially forced into years and sometimes a lifetime of steroid dependency just to function day to day. And as you might guess, this prolonged steroid use unleashes a whole cascade of really dangerous side effects. We are talking about severe osteoporosis, which makes the bones incredibly brittle. It spikes your blood sugar, leading to diabetes. It severely compromises the immune system, leaving you at a high risk for infections. Oh, and it causes sarcopenia, which is severe muscle wasting. So it's a brutal irony. The very medicine keeping the patient moving is simultaneously destroying their overall health and quality of life.
But there is good news, which brings us to part 5, the path to recovery. Thankfully, the last 10 years of medical research have finally given us a way to break this vicious cycle.
Scientists actually cracked the code by zooming all the way into the molecular level. They identified the exact culprit, a cytokine known as interleukin-6, or IL-6 for short. You can think of IL-6 as this hyperactive messenger molecule. It's the specific substance running through the body, just frantically commanding the immune system to create all of this severe inflammation in the joints and the blood vessels.
And the leap we've made since finding that out is just incredible. Back in the old era, we relied heavily on those steroids, which were essentially a broad systemic blast to the entire body. But once we pinpointed IL-6, it ushered in this completely new era of biologic drugs, like seralimab. These are IL-6 inhibitors, and they offer absolute pinpoint accuracy. They specifically block that hyperactive messenger molecule. This drastically reduces the need for steroids, cuts way down on those terrible side effects we talked about, and dramatically improves the patient's quality of life. It is literally a game changer.
But defeating PMR isn't just about taking a new pill or getting an injection. It requires a really comprehensive, holistic recovery plan. We call this a treat-to-target strategy. Yes, you use the targeted biologics to minimize the steroids, for sure, but equally important is early physical therapy. Remember, these patients are usually over 50, and their muscles and bones have been weakened both by age and by that previous steroid use. So focusing on fall prevention, safe walking, and physically rebuilding that strength, that is absolutely essential to a true recovery.
The ultimate takeaway here is really about hope. PMR is not just a simple ache, but it's also not a hopeless life sentence either. By getting the correct diagnosis, looking past those perfectly normal blood tests, and combining modern biologic medication with proper physical care, patients who were once completely immobilized can absolutely reclaim their active lives. They can actually feel the joy of moving again. So what does this all mean for us? Well, we've seen today that just because pain is invisible on an X-ray or a lab test, it absolutely does not mean it isn't real. The agony of PMR is profound, it's just hidden deep in those bursae and blood vessels. So let this explainer be a reminder to all of us. The next time someone tells you they are in unexplained pain, try to approach them not with skepticism, but with deep empathy and a little bit of curiosity. Because sometimes the most devastating battles people are fighting are the ones we simply cannot see. Thanks for exploring this medical mystery with me.